And was just so impressed with what he had to say. And I thought it would be a good program to have for League. So Raul, thank you so much for being with us. I'll just give you a little, he's going to tell his own story, but here's just a little bit of a bio that he might not talk about. He's a business development specialist and a Nebraska leader and advocate. And here we go. He's also a trained chef in classic and modern American cuisine. I think he should cook for us sometime if he's So Raul, thank you so much for being here, and we're anxious to hear what you have to say. And just a reminder to everyone, if you are not the current speaker, please mute yourself.
Well, I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak with you all. It's always very humbling to get to share my story, and then to motivate, specifically because that's part of, I think, me as an individual, is to motivate, especially the young population, to get involved. And that's part of what when I talk about why I do the things I do, is to motivate people and to motivate, especially the youth, to become involved, not only within their community, but also become involved civically. Because as we're seeing, especially if we're looking at just mentioning back to the State Board of Education, you know, those who are opposing any of the changes of the State Board of Education are the loudest voices. But how do we get more people who do understand why some of these some of this politics need to be implemented into the school board system? Why they need to happen is we need to get more people that they need to be involved, who also support all these initiatives. And that's, I think, the most important piece of everything that you'll hear from me today is, how do we find that passion that we're searching for to become involved? Because a lot of you probably have been involved with this organization for a while. So how do we seek others who are passionate about the same thing? So again, I'm going to go off a little bit about my bio. As Judy said, I am a business development specialist. I help businesses. My region that I cover for work is Grand Island to Scottsbluff, north and south. And I've been doing it for 2 years now. Previous to that, I was a community organizer with the Harlem Worker Center here in Grand Island. Like Judy said, I am trained as a classic and modern American cuisine as a chef. Well, I'll have to put you guys on a waiting list because to cook for you guys, because I tend to get a lot of requests, or to have cooking classes. I did food service for 17 years, and after 17 years, I decided that I needed to do something to do more for the community, to create a bigger impact, and to demonstrate to the youth to become involved. So I decided to come back to what I love doing, what I'm passionate about, is helping others to grow their communities. But a little before we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I came into the U.S. In 1991. So if you can believe it, I've been in the States for 31 years. My family migrated to Burley, Idaho when I was 8 years old. And after 2 years, one of my cousins traveled to Nebraska because he was told that Nebraska was the state of the good life. And with that in mind, my mom said, you know what? Let's go see what the state of the good life can bring for the three of us. So after 2 years of living in Burley, Idaho, we moved to Schuyler, Nebraska, in, I believe, was 1993. Because we were told that Nebraska was the state of the good life. Little did my mom know she would spend the next, I would say, 15 to 16 years working at a meat packing plant. Where unfortunately, after working for that long for one particular one, she ended up getting sick. She had cancer, And because she missed a couple of days here and there because of the treatment that she was in, they started accumulating points. And she was let go. And that, took a toll on our family. And it was very difficult. I graduated from Madison High School in Madison, Nebraska, little town of 2,000 people. I graduated at the top of my class, 10%. I was number 7 out of 53, first Latino to graduate with honors. And I also represented the state of Nebraska in the National History Day competition back in 2000. I was one of few from the state that represented the state at Washington, D.C. I was also on the honor roll and honor society since my sophomore year all the way to graduation. I also received the Outstanding Academic Excellence Award from the President, George W. Bush, and I was also very humbled to be picked by the ELS Club as Teen Volunteer of the Year. And why is that important? Again, it goes back to being involved in your community. Part of it came from need. My mom, when she worked at Tyson Foods, because she was a single mother, she worked sometimes double shifts to provide ends meet for my brother and myself. She always told us that if anything that we obtained from her was an education, and that if we did not take her upon her word that that's what she wanted us is an education, that would rest on us. So out of the need that my mom was never home because she was working to provide a better future for my brother and myself, what I ended up doing is I would drag my little brother to go volunteer because I needed to keep us busy. I needed to keep us out of trouble. So we would volunteer. We would go and help at the library. We helped at the Catholic Church with some of their festivals. During the summer, we were tutors for some of the kids who were in ESL. Any activity I think that was in town, you name it. I think my brother and I were there. I attended my brother's parent-teacher conferences because my mom sometimes was unable to attend. I attended most of his sporting events just to make sure that he knew that somebody was there for him. And that's when we go back to why. Why do we become involved in our communities? For me, I will have to tell you that I was very blessed that while my time at Madison High School, I had teachers who cared, who pushed me. I have deep respect for one in particular who passed away a couple years ago because she said that she saw something in me. And she's the one that pushed me to go out for drama. And she lied to me, told me I was going to have a tiny little part in a musical. And I ended up being one of the leads. And I just remember the first time I got up on that stage, I was so nervous. There were these walls that we were supposed to move from being in the garden in the castle that I let it go, and it accidentally fell into the audience. It didn't hit anybody, but I just remember that she told me, she goes, "It's not the mistake that you make, it's how you get up and recover." And that has always been, stuck in the back of my mind, that no matter how many times I've fallen, it's how I recovered and how I managed to get back to, to be passionate for what we do. And those teachers, and I can name them all, were the ones that helped me, get out of my shell, to start caring even more for my community than what I was doing. Obviously, volunteering came out of need, but then it grew into something that I absolutely love. I loved helping people. I love volunteering. I love participating in my community as much as I can. And that's something that even now is what I try to get youth to understand. Why do we need to become involved? I did receive, upon graduation, I received a full scholarship to Wayne State College, because I was, from all those years that I spent in Madison, and how the teachers were so involved in helping me become the person I am today. I decided that I wanted to be a school teacher, that I also wanted to educate and impact somebody's life in a positive manner, like they impacted me. Unfortunately, because I wasn't documented at the time, my tuition, the scholarship that I had gotten, only covered in-state tuition, and at the time, none of the colleges recognized undocumented students as residents of the state. Unfortunately, I was unable to finish. I had to drop out because I couldn't come up with the money to pay the difference between in-state tuition and out-of-state tuition. So I ended up dropping out. It was in 2012. I remember it clearly because it's the day after my birthday, June 15, 2012, when President Obama announced DACA. DACA forever changed my life. I was able to obtain a work permit. I was able to get a social security card. Even though I worked on my own, I did translation and I did cakes, and I paid my taxes because I did file my taxes. Now this was for me for DACA. This was the way to do it all legally. To walk out of the shadows, and to continue motivating um, young people to care and to become involved in their communities. I was able to get a license. I was one of the DACA recipients who participated and also motivated other DACA recipients in the state, because as you know, the state of Nebraska became the last state in the union to give licenses to DACA recipients, because it was unfounded fear that we would get a license forever, which uh, apparently some of our um, people in charge didn't understand the laws themselves. And I think that's part of the huge misconception of immigration, because I always get told, you speak perfect English, you don't have an accent, you pay your taxes, you help the community, and they keep saying all this stuff. It's like, why don't you just become a citizen? I've been working at this for years. Unfortunately, with DACA, there is no pathway to citizenship. You either have to have your parents have to be permanent residents, or aka green card holders, or they have to be citizens. You have to marry a U.S. citizen, and then you have to prove that that marriage is valid, and it's not because you married them because you wanted a green card. Or you have to get the work permit through your employer, which that one's even harder, because at the end of the day, you have to show that you're more qualified than the U.S. citizen. So all those little obstacles, when somebody says, "Why don't you become a U.S. citizen?" I always tell them that is my biggest dream, because since I was 8 years old and now I'm going to be 40 this year, this is where I grew up. It took a village to raise me, and I honestly believe that. I honestly believe that Madison took me in as one of their own, that the school teachers took me in and raised me, taught me, were that mother figure, that unfortunately, because she had to work all the time to provide a living for not only myself, but for my brother, unfortunately wasn't there. We only got to see her on the weekends, or when she came home at night. That's where I learned how to cook. I learned from a little bit from my grandmother, and then I learned how to cook on my own because I had to cook for my little brother. And dinner was always ready when she got home. So again, it was, how do I, from the need, How do I become a role model for my brother? But then out of that comes, how do I become a role model for other kids in the community who find themselves in the same situation, who, would like to go to college, who maybe would like a better job or bring other opportunities to their community, but because they can't, they're unable to. One of the other things, going back to the licenses, in 2016, when we were organizing across the state to bring DACA recipients to the legislative hearing on LB 623 at the time to provide licenses, I was able to contact a lot of DACA recipients in the state who were in the same boat as me, who, even though we had a work permit and a way to work, I was still fearful that I would get pulled over by the cops, and getting that ticket for not having a license would be a reason why they would take away DACA. So even now that, even in 2016, and you think about it, and that hasn't been that almost 6 years ago, they were still fearful in the state of Nebraska of getting in like that minimal misdemeanor that you would risk to losing DACA. So we came together, we organized, we filled not only the legislative room that the hearing took place, we also filled 2 more rooms. That was probably one of the longest hearings I've sat in, because there was an abundance of stories of why LB 623 had to pass. While we were there, we were able to talk to senators directly. I was able to help bring more DACA recipients to the legislative hearing to hear their story, to understand why it was important to bring, to provide licenses. And then a year later, we also organized again, because Nebraska was, again, the last state to provide professional licenses for DACA recipients. So now you had all these kids who graduated, the top of their class in high school, who went to college, got an education, got a degree, and now because they didn't have a professional license, because they were DACA recipients, they weren't able to practice. Especially right now, when we look at the medical field and then education, where we're suffering because we don't have enough employees, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough educators. I think it's pivotal too, when we're looking at the DREAM Act that was originally a concept or legislative piece back in 2000, 22 years ago. The DREAM Act was originally proposed. And 22 years later, we still haven't done anything. We still haven't compromised. And I think that's one of the big, huge pieces also when I talk to youth. At some point, we have to compromise to get our foot in the door and then move forward to making things better. Because we have to get our foot in the door in order to change things. But we also have to be passionate about it, and we have to talk. We have to, reach out to our senators, to our representatives. And that's one of the things that I think is super important when I talk to the youth is, great, so you're marching. Love it. But if you're not contacting your senator, if you're not contacting your representative, action dies in action. Because you just marched, but then you didn't communicate what you're passionate about to the person who holds the power to change things. And I think out of everything that I've done, I think that's the key when I talk to the youth and I say, so you want to march? Great, I will be there with you. I'll be in the front line. But then what are we doing afterwards? What are we doing to get to the person who has the power, who is able to change things for us? And I think out of everything, like I said again, is how do we get the youth to become involved? When we're seeing that social media is, all they want to do is be on social media. I see it all the time. I presented to the high school a couple months ago on the power of being involved, the passion to lead power, and a lot of them, they were passionate about a lot of things, but one of the things that I think was difficult for them is talking to somebody who had the power to change the thing that they were passionate about. So now the question begs is, are we doing enough for these youth that are passionate about something to talk to somebody? A lot of them said that they just didn't know how to approach them. They didn't know. I'm like, just ask for an appointment, make a meeting, ask for a meeting, and just sit down and say, hey, I'm concerned about this. How do we move forward? The worst thing they can say is, it's not the time, but let's continue talking on how we progressively change something. And one of the things I think for me, the biggest highlight was working in the 2018 elections here in Grand Island with the Harlem Worker Center. It was the first time that there was massive canvassing done in Spanish. The way it was done, we hit, I believe it was 6 different precincts where Latinos or Spanish speakers were. Depending on what precinct you were, like first precinct here in Grand Island was always either green card holders or first generation Nebraskans. And then, the deeper you got into the different precincts, it was a mix. And the issues themselves changed. So then when I was talking to my canvassers, I'm like, now that we know when we did the first round, when we went out the second round, I'm like, we have to change the way we talk to the people we're canvassing from precinct to precinct, because their issues now have changed. We had an idea that precinct 1 was more focused on immigration because that was their number one thing. Precinct 2 and 3, immigration was second on their list, but number 1 was the economy. And then the deeper we got into, they were third or fourth generation Nebraskans, then it was completely different. They talked about border security. They talked about Second Amendment, and so immigration was the furthest topic on their mind. But one of the things that we noticed, even in precinct number 3 here in Grand Island, was that those people in that precinct were eager to learn about voting. That one, if you go back, and you can go and talk to Tracy Overstreet, the Hall County Elections Commissioner, precinct number 3 had the highest voter registration of that year and one of the highest voter turnouts amongst Latinos. And I'm not saying that our work was the only one, because I know there were other organizations out there, but when we're talking just specifically Latino on why they became involved, it was talking to them personally in their language, giving them, it was the first year also that the early voting ballot was translated into Spanish. So then they saw a lot of return on those early voting ballots. One of the other things, we also provided the voter guides that I know you guys do too. Those were also in Spanish. So when we're looking at how do we engage people, it goes back to the passion. If we can get to why people are passionate about, why do people become involved, and what are the issues that get to them, I think a lot of the times we can get them to mobilize. And I think that was a huge advantage that we had. And like I said, we put in a lot of hours. I actually got sick. I ended up with pneumonia because we were walking when it was cold and it was raining. And even though my doctor's like, you cannot go outside, you're contagious. I was still trying to help my canvassers being at home, quarantined. And I was calling them. I'm like, hey, we need to do this, we need to do that. Because again, I didn't want that the people that we contacted and all those potential voters to say, we're not going to engage now because we've lost that communication. One of the other things that was done in the 2018 elections, we also provided rides to the polls. We had volunteers that were providing rides to the polls. One of the stories that I absolutely loved were these 4 little old ladies. And part of it, I think, why it caught my attention, they reminded me of my grandma. One was one that we talked to, and we talked to her for maybe 40 minutes to an hour. It wasn't even about voting. It was about her grandkids. We talked about our grandmother, and the mutual respect that we had for her. And then she goes, okay, I will register to vote. And that was her first year. And she'd been a citizen for, I believe, over 10 years, and she'd never voted. Once we got that, why she was, when we started talking to her, we figured out what she was passionate about. We got her to register. And then I go, do you have a ride? And she said, no. And I'm like, okay, I will personally come pick you up and let me know what time you want. She called 3 other friends who also registered to vote. They all wanted a ride. I picked them up, and in my car, those 4 ladies were just chatting up about how excited they were to go vote for the first time. They were all first-time voters, and they were all either in their 60s or early 70s. First time that they themselves voted. They were excited that somebody spoke Spanish, was able to help them translate when they were voting, and that they had a voter guide that they used in order to figure out who they were going to vote for. And then when I picked them all up, because I dropped them off and I picked them all up, they were all excited that they had their little sticker that says, I voted today. And that to me was being sick, walking and doing everything that we did for those midterm elections. That to me was the biggest highlight of the year. Not that we've helped, get voter participation turnout and everything. It was that story of those 4 old ladies who were so excited to vote for the first time, who to them that little sticker meant more in that day. And then I said, we need to get now the youth to be as excited as they were. But where do we start? And my challenge, I guess, to you is, how do we bring more people to become involved? I know there was a couple years ago, I still have a button that says, give a damn about the elections. And that's something that even this year, it's going to be pivotal, is how do we get people motivated? After everything that we've seen in the last 2 years, where people are becoming more outspoken, how do we get people to not only compromise, but also respect each other, but at the same time become engaged? And I keeping in my time frame, I keep looking at my clock to make sure that if you guys have any questions, you can ask. And one of the things that here in Grand Island, what I've been trying to do is continue to build that network of youth that want to become involved. That's why I continue doing trainings, leadership trainings with the high school. With Yolanda Nuncio, we have a group together that's called Somos GI, or We Are GI, who's trying to develop new leaders. Because again, it goes back to, how do we get people involved? How do we get people to bring out that passion that they have in order to care for their community? Because it all starts at the local level. Because if we don't care about what happens in the local level, it's not going to matter what happens at the federal or state level. Because it is our local level that things need to change. And we need to see people starting to care. And it's super important, again, to get the youth involved. But then what our challenge now to us is, how do we get them to do? And something super important, and why I share my story, a lot of the times it comes from need. Need is the greatest inventor and the greatest motivator for anybody to do something. And I don't have to tell you guys that. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have had that happen to you. But how now? How do we motivate the youth? How do we give them? How do we get them to give a damn? And I'm sorry for the language, but I think for me it's super important. Even now, is how do we motivate them? How do we motivate people to start caring locally to make change? And I keep going back to, it's passion. We have to find what people are passionate about, and then how do we tie back that in? In a good example, when I was with Harlem Worker Centers, they had Young Nebraskans in Action, and I had a group of 20 youth here in Grand Island who were willing, who were motivated, and that they cared. And a couple of them said, I care about the parks. I want to take my little brother and have nice parks. And one day I took him out and we cleaned up one of the parks. But how do we tie back that in to your local government, to where the money's coming from and all the funding, in order to make sure that the park's getting taken care of? Who do we need to talk to? And once we started tying all those loose ends, they were able to understand that it all came back to them acting upon their passion. They cared about the park. Now let's find the root of how these parks are getting taken care of. So it was all about finding that passion to get him to commit to action, and to doing that action and to follow through. And again, it's super important. And I'll keep repeating, I'll sound like a broken record, but it's that passion to get him to move, passion to finding a way to change, to create a wave of change, or just even to motivate them to want to be, the change. And I think, again, for me, need was the greatest gift to motivate me to commit to my community and to help change and to create an impact of where I lived. If you ask my employers, they'll tell you I'm like a little tornado, because I think I've lived in about every part in the state. But I believe that in every location that I've lived in, or every town that I've lived in, I've tried to, be the positive change, and to be show people why we need to care. And with that, that's the end of my presentation, my little speech. If you guys have any questions, I'm more than glad to answer them. Like I said, I always leave you with the challenge. How do we get others to become motivated, to want to participate?
Raul, thank you so much for giving your time to us. I think so many of the things that you talked about, you should be a League of Women Voters member. You would fit right in. I want to congratulate you on 2 huge actions that you led, and that was to get Nebraska to give driver's licenses to DACA recipients, and the second was the professional licenses. Those were both so ridiculous that you had to work so hard, and that we were the last state. So I really wanted to congratulate you on that. And with that, I'll be quiet so people can ask questions or make comments.
Raul, I have a question about the census. What is your sense of how many of the DACA recipients were actually counted? How well did Nebraska count its Hispanic population?
I think, I worked in a little bit of the census before I left the Harlem Worker Center. That was a daunting task, especially because with the citizenship question, a lot of people refused to even fill out the census. I know when we were out canvassing for it, some people said, "Why does it matter?" And we would try to educate people and tell them, "This is where we get our resources. This is where we get a lot of the funding for our community." I go, and if they don't know how many people are living here, then our resources are going to be limited. I think the state, I'm not going to say it tried super hard, because then we all know that that wasn't the case. But I think the DACA recipients, most of us do understand why the census were important. And I know from the ones that I contacted, did fill out their census information. They also reached out to some of their family members to fill it out, just to make sure that they were counted. Because again, I think a lot of them did understand that the census would affect their community and the funding that they would get. Especially when we're talking about, how would it affect public schools? How would it affect the hospitals? How would it, and I think, again, going back to everything that I talk about is just finding their passion. And when we were talking to some of the DACA recipients, a lot of them were in the medical field. A lot of them were in the education. So to them, not filling out the census were super, it was critical because it would affect them in the long run, especially when we're talking about funding and keeping those funding sources in our community and keeping it local.
Have you gotten good support from Senator Aguilar?
Unfortunately, with Senator Aguilar, I don't have a great relationship, especially during the campaign when he sent out when it wasn't him, but he didn't denounce the postcard that was sent out against Senator Quick, where it was very derogatory towards immigrants. I know we reached out to him and he never said anything or stood up to that postcard that was sent out. So then it's kind of hindered that communication that we have with him. I know we've tried to reach out a couple times. He has taken our phone calls, and he would like to sit down with us and just talk. So I think we're just going to continue building that relationship. Same thing that we do with Adrian Smith. We just continue talking to them just to make sure that they understand that at the end of the day, we are still residents of the state, and that we do have concerns, just depending on what issues they are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who else? Jane Marie, welcome. I see that you've joined us.
Yeah.
I think I should know the answer to this, but how often do DACA recipients have to re-up, and how much does that cost?
So we have to renew our work permit every 2 years, and right now it's close to $600. It is a burden, but I think, and this is something that I guess I shared last time when we're looking at the immigration system, going back to when people ask me, why don't I just become a citizen? Because the immigration system has been broken for a while. We have people that have been waiting the right way, as I'm told, been waiting the right way for years, even decades. Some of them, unfortunately, have died waiting to come in the right way because there's a backlog of cases, and there is just not. If you were to look or even contact one of the immigration advocacy agencies, they will tell you what year they're working on. the last I heard, they're not even up to, I think, 2,000 on cases that are backlogged. So when we're talking about immigration, and people ask me, why don't you just do it the right, or why don't you just become a citizen? We need to fix the immigration system first. If you think about it, and I always tell them, if there is 1 million undocumented people in the US, if you were to tell me today that I had to pay $10,000 as a fine, I would find that money or get a loan to ensure that I pay that fine, start that immigration, that process to become a citizen. And if you told me that it would take another 10 years for me to become a US, to become a US citizen, that I would be a green card recipient, and I paid $10,000, I would do it too. Because at the end of the day, my end goal was to become a citizen. Now, if you're looking at what that would bring, you would have people working for 10 years who could not, because usually if you want to retire, if you're a green card holder and you say that you've been a green card holder for 20 years, and if you're not a citizen, you want to retire, you're only going to get 80% of your benefits. So if you think about it, I'm 40. You're going to tell me that I'm going to work another 10 years with my either resident card, plus I'm going to pay that fine. How the influx into Social Security and Medicaid, that people will not be able to withdraw from it. I mean, but again, it's fixing that immigration system, because a lot of times, even like for DACA recipient, I don't know Mexico anymore. I haven't been to Mexico in almost 32 years. To me, Nebraska is home. I feel as Nebraskan as Herbie Husker. I tried to move away, and I only lasted 6 months, and I came running back.
Oh.
So to me, Nebraska is home. To me, my biggest dream again is to become a US citizen, because that's going to make me even more proud of being a Nebraskan. So again, it goes back to fixing the immigration system. Like I said, the DREAM Act has been up since its original conception back in 2000, and that's been 22 years ago. We still can't compromise on how to bring the DREAM Act forward to actual legislation. And again, it baffles me, because you have about 70% of the country saying that they support some type of legislation for DACA recipients or dreamers. But yet you have our Congress and Senate, we just can't come together and say, okay, we need to fix this. We've had, a couple of years ago, we had 4 different bills. I can only think of, I think there's a Secure America Act, there was the DREAM Act of 2020, I believe, and then there was something else, and there was like 4 different ones. And it baffled me that we couldn't get our Senate and we couldn't get our representatives to come together and say, you know what, let's compromise and bring pieces of all 4 legislation and create a new bill that everybody's happy with. None of those pieces of legislation were the greatest, but even for me, I would accept anything in there just to get my foot in the door so I could become a US citizen. Even if it meant paying a certain fine, or saying that it would take me another 10 years to become a US citizen. It's taken me 20 years of working the immigration system. What's another 10? But we need to, I know it sounds like a lot, but what's another 10 years? I waited all this years, all this time. So to me, we need to find a compromise. We need to continue talking about it, because if we don't, it's just going to continue the same thing over and over again. And again, if we're looking at just like the DREAM Act itself, it's been 22 years and it still has nothing has come out of it.
I so admire your passion and your ability to continue to inspire other people in spite of this fight. I shouldn't call it a fight, I guess, struggle that you're having about citizenship. I was going to make a comment about how it's hard for the young people to approach their lawmakers when they have a passion about something, and and you're encouraging them, don't just walk, do those contacts. And I just wanted to say that's hard for anybody of any age, but the more you do it, it becomes easier. And it's like, oh yeah, nobody did anything bad to me the last time I did that, so I can go ahead and do it. So good for you for working with those youth. I feel like we're running a little bit out of time, and I feel like I've taken too much time. Who else has a question or a comment? Sandy Seifert put a comment in the chat saying thanks.
And I've actually had the pleasure of working with Sandy. She was, when I was working in Columbus with Centro Hispano, she was one of our volunteers who always came out to help during the citizenship clinics that we've had. So I'm always very thankful that she always came out and helped those other people achieve their dream of becoming a U.S. citizen.
Sandy continues to do good work.
Yes. So thank you, Sandy.
I want to say thank you, but I am also humbled by how hard you have to work and how little I know about how hard you've had to. It is embarrassing to me that it has taken you more than 20 years and you're not a citizen.
Oh.
Like I said, I think it goes back to continuing to talk to our representatives and our senators. Like I said, I always reach out to Adrian Smith and tell him, hey, he already, I think at this point, he's like, oh my God, it's Raul again. But I continue to develop that relationship. I've always mentioned to him, because he was a really good friend with one of the Sapp brothers, because I worked for that company. And I told him, I go, ask him who I was for that company. And then you'll know my history. And because we always want to make that connection to make sure that they understand like why it's pivotal for legislation to move through. And even again, it's going back to that change, localizing your community and figuring out how you can make a change locally to affect either the state or a federal level. And that's where it starts. It's getting involved in your community.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it for having me share my story. And again, it goes back to how do we motivate people, especially the youth?
It's always the question, isn't it? And Raul, your story will probably be known by more people because Tony Herman, our reporter from the Tribune, is on the call. And he's always done such a good job of reporting about our programs. So I suspect that there will be more ripples than you knew.
Judy,
Again, thank you. Sorry.
Judy, I just need to announce it because of a complication. I will not be going to the legislative day.
Oh, okay.
But we can all attend by Zoom, and I would encourage everybody to, I don't know if you have to sign up, I think you do, sign up to be on the Zoom for the legislative day next Tuesday.
On the 15th, yeah. And again, that link has been sent out a couple of times at least, but if you don't have it and you want to attend by Zoom, let me know and we will get that link to you. So again, Raul, thank you so much for giving us your time and your inspiration. As I said,
for having me on.
You should be a league member.
I'm trying to limit myself again because I've been asked to be on boards and
I'm sure.
And even be part of membership. And I tell them, I'm like,
Sure.
right now with work, with some of the stuff that we're doing, I've had to apologize to Yolanda too, because I'm like, I can't make meetings because I'm at work. And it's crazy to see just, how we can motivate others. And I hope that, that I do that with my limited time. And just hopefully, like I said, if one person of who I talk to says, hey, because of what, you told your story and you motivated me, I've now also, committed to my community. So
I feel motivated. I hope that we can follow through with some of your recommendations. So thank you so much, and no pressure
you.
about joining leagues. Okay.
If you guys have any material that you would like, especially in Spanish, we would be more than welcome to have it so we could distribute it here in Grand Island.
Thank you. That's a great offer.
So, I'm always up for walking through town and canvassing and handing out materials. So just let me know how I can help.
That's awesome. And thank you, Chris, for setting up our Zoom. And thank you, Tony, for being here and covering our stories. And I'm going to leave now. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you all.